Welcome to the world premiere performance. It's generally known as the ABC of spirituality, but we found out the correct title of it is the ABC of the spiritual path. I'm surprised and gratified that so many Baba lovers see themselves to be here tonight, admitting that they're still beginners on the path. The ABC. Of course, back in the 1950s, when this was written, most people have forgotten that we're all nothing but the self with a capital S. And hence we're all condemned to eternity. So it behoves us all to try and do something about it. Francis was writing to an audience that was totally ignorant of such issues. As Ward said, it exists just in the one handwritten manuscript in Francis's handwriting. It's very neatly done, neatly that is for Francis, and it's, as Ross Keating says in his book on Francis Brabazon, it seems to have been written with few hesitations or alterations. Francis has been through it at least once, correcting it a little bit, but it gives you the impression that he wrote it straight off from the top of his head. Francis had written to Baba in May of 1955, saying that he was contemplating a new writing project, and Baba gave him the go-ahead. Francis, in the ABC, he calls it his essay. He was probably ready at that stage of his life to go on with a lot of instruction and teaching in prose, but of course he switched over to poetry, and the great thing it is that he did switch over to poetry because his poetry got better and better over the years, and at least until after Baba dropped the body. One of Francis's favourite authors was Ezra Pound. Now, in 1934, he published a book called The ABC of Reading. This is a long time ago. Even Bill the Page was still running around in short pants at that stage. This is a book that has an ironic title, really. It sets out as pretending to be a primer for beginners, but in fact it's a very sophisticated book on how to creatively respond to poetry. Francis, too, pretends to write a primer, but he is in fact writing what is revealed as a new and complete path to spirituality. If it was being published today, it would probably be called An Idiot's Guide to Spirituality, or Spirituality for Dummies. But calling it an ABC really conveys his belief that books can only be primers. The spiritual path has to be experienced and lived, and has to have contact with a master. It's written like a textbook in numbered sections, and they have subsections. I thought it mightn't be very much good. It had been sitting there since the 50s, Francis himself pillaged a bit of stuff from it to put in the section of Stay with God, Steps to His Feet, but it doesn't seem to have been used at all apart from that. And but Francis didn't destroy it, so we're assuming that Francis wouldn't mind it being released now. I certainly think that it's an amazing document. It shows how much Francis had learnt from Baba and from his Sufi training. It's in 4 sections. This is not a lesson, so I'm not going to use a whiteboard and write up the sections and try and get you to remember the plan. It's trying to make the reading of this document as immediate as possible. Anyway, the 4 sections are the path, the foundation, the method, and the master. The typed version that I'll be reading from ends up as 29 pages long. We should be able to cover about half of it in excerpts today. So I guess Francis was hoping to wake up the West with this short book. He was very much aware of the deep ignorance of the West, especially after he'd been on that remarkable Andhra tour with Baba. He saw the shallowness and the barrenness of Western civilization. I also think that this document is very approachable, especially for people who don't find it easy to come to the higher sort of involved language that is so effective in Stay with God, but which is difficult for many people to read. Well, right from the beginning, I think you'll find, as soon as I start to read it, that it's full of confidence and authority. The ABC of the spiritual path. 1, the path. The spiritual path is the progress from oneself limited in consciousness to oneself with unlimited consciousness. From oneself as a finite being to oneself as infinite being. From the condition of bondage to the state of freedom. From ignorance to knowledge. From isolationism to universality. From the alternations of satisfactions, dissatisfactions, happiness and misery, pleasure and pain, to abiding bliss. It's the longest journey you can take, and while it can be done in the twinkling of an eye, it's usually a long drawn-out affair, taking an entire lifetime, even many lives, depending on the degree of preparedness, the sincerity of effort, and the grace of perfect master. One has already been on the journey a few million years, creeping up step by step through the immense periods and processes called evolution. So it's foolish to think that one is going to do the remainder of the journey in a hop, skip and a jump. But at the same time, it's stupid to think I could never enter in this way because I have not got so-and-so qualifications or because I have so-and-so handicaps. The whole painful business of evolution was nothing else but yourself forging higher and higher forms through which it is possible to experience your own self, capital S, finally and absolutely. As a great teacher, Shankar, says, difficult is it to obtain human birth. Once one's achieved this, one is a suicide if one does not press on to realisation of the self. Such self-realisation is impossible at subhuman stage and difficult enough at the human level. So a great Sufi said, you can sit at the gate for 1,000 years, but the Sufi is one who says to you, if you have courage and sense, get up and take a step, and God will take the next. There are three ways of travelling a path. The way of ignorance, which is the way of the majority, in which one progresses slowly and painfully through the experiences of life. The way of lovers, which is followed by those who have an appreciation of beauty and a tendency towards friendship and sacrifice. And three, the way of complete renunciation, in which comfort and discomfort, happiness and unhappiness are disregarded, and one fixes one's sight on the goal and goes straight to it, the way of the very few. We will assume that you've already tired of the first way, the way of ignorance, and that you're not attracted to the third way, the way of total renunciation. That leaves you open to the second way, the way of the lovers, in which you only have to use the attributes and faculties common to all human beings in a special direction. The following points are intended to help clear the ground. Okay. Here he goes through a number of points to remember clearing the ground for the way. The first thing to understand is that there's a gulf of difference between practice and theory. And again, between realisation of the object of practice and the practice itself. Understanding this will save one a jungle of confusion and a mountain of conceit. The next thing to be clear about is that truth is an absolute condition. No man ever has or ever will add one jot to it. No succeeding generation will ever find out anything more about it. It's already known in its full extent and has been from the time of Adam or Manu or whoever it was. That means you have to try to cut out all ideas about progress or progressive knowledge or thought. Francis didn't believe in the idols of the West that saw an incremental progress and achievement being achieved all the time. He felt, in fact, that a child brought up in the present USA has to have many more informations crammed down its mental throat than the child of the people in the middle of New Guinea. But he has not any more knowledge. In fact, in many ways, he has less. Knowledge may be defined as that quality of being which enables one to live in harmony with oneself and with the world around one. Information may or may not be contributing to that state. The excessive pursuit of information is in fact the opposite direction to the acquirement of knowledge. The keeping of consciousness on the surface seems to be the sole purpose of modern education. This is not to be wondered at, since the purpose of education nowadays is economic and not cultural. A degree is not a recognition of the quality of consciousness, but is merely a certificate of the requisite number of informations necessary to get a job, a work ticket. And among children, that one is looked upon as being the best developed, whose mind is the quickest at picking up the changing patterns of the shadows on the wall. The quiz kids being the model for all children. I think Francis probably would have been amazed and appalled at the sort of quiz shows. The Quiz Kids was, some of you may remember, was a popular show in the 40s and 50s and 60s, but now, of course, quiz shows are almost exclusively trivia shows, which are flaunting their contempt for anything that passes as real knowledge and seeing on an equal level trivia with wisdom. In fact, you can't help thinking it, Francis. He found the 50s bad enough, but what he'd say now, I don't know. The third thing, so we're going through point by point here. The third thing to know is that there are 6 planes of relative knowledge to pass through before arrival at absolute knowledge. That these planes of knowledge have already been thoroughly explored and completely known. That it is well nigh impossible to get even the first plane by self-effort. That is, without the help or the grace of someone who's already mastered these planes. The fourth point, the path to truth is not an addition, but a subtraction. Not a learning, but an unlearning. Not a gaining, but a losing. As Jesus pointed out to the rich young man, you cannot add the kingdom of heaven to your other possessions. But you must give up all to follow me. The mystery and bewilderment of love is that the lover loves the beloved only to find, when he achieves union with the beloved, that he is the beloved whom he loved. All love songs are tinged with this mystery, which is why they appeal to all classes of people. All people, consciously or unconsciously, long for proximity to and union with some beloved. And clearly or dimly, they feel themselves as the beloved. Francis likes, a lot of the time he's engaging in a sort of dialogue with the reader, carrying on a conversation as you go. He says, now, if the pursuit of truth is a process of loss, the obvious rejoinder is, what is the point of entering upon such a path? How do I know for sure that by losing myself and everything I hold dear, I will find myself? That's a question that occurs to most people. And the answer is, it is the last thing you should allow anyone to persuade you into. You will come to it yourself when you become thoroughly tired of the unsatisfactoriness of yourself. When you're tired of your imprisonment by your own possessions. When you've really found out that all the vaunted securities are no securities. When you're tired of the merry-go-round and feel like sitting down quietly on your own for a bit. When the clunk and clink of a beer mug or a cocktail glass are a warning of distraction instead of a note of invitation. But you will come to it mostly because you're sick of yourself. As we've been told already this afternoon. Because it's a course which you yourself prescribed for you to take. Because it was only yourself, eons ago, who created the universe and got yourself involved in it. Not someone other than you called God, but your own self, which is God. Concern with the spiritual path is the natural occupation of every adult and is inherent in everyone. To be not concerned with the path is an admission of the continuance of childishness, for it is as unnatural for the adult to remain absorbed in worldly pursuits as it is natural for the child to be so absorbed. For the child came here out of curiosity of the world, but the child becomes a man in order to experience God in this world, his own body. Francis is very much a Platonist and somebody who sees both the world out there as shadows and illusion, and also the human body, mind, as a microcosm of the universe. Fifth, no need to keep count. Fifth, this path lies within yourself. That is why there has to be a turning, a repentance. All one's activities and thoughts up to this point have been outside oneself, within the boundary of one's environment, or within the boundary of the objective world, or worlds. This has kept consciousness on the surface of being, on the rim of existence. Now it has to be turned back towards the depth of being, towards the hub. Further expansion outwardly is not nearer to the goal, but is only further away. As readers of Francis's poetry will remember his utter scorn for attempts to get to the moon and expand further out in an empire of space. Yes, of course, maybe we're largely familiar with these truths that Francis is enunciating. It's written for outsiders, people who haven't come across a path, but it doesn't hurt to hear these basic truths enunciated so clearly and well the way he does. Childhood and youth is the period of experiencing the world. Adulthood is the time of turning back and finding the self. One only needs a house, meaning the body and mind. One only needs a house adequate for one's requirements. 2 or 3 dozen extra rooms filled with junk will not add anything either to the comfort or to the proper functioning of the household. And he saw so much of modern art as being unnecessarily complicating the message of art and trying to always pander to people's desire to expand out into the new. The 6th thing, on we go very methodically. The 6th thing you may be sure about is that none of the scriptures contradict one another. The apparent contradiction are due to time and place, when they're given, where they're given, because all of them contain errors of translation and interpolation. Now, what are the scriptures? The real scriptures are not even the books, but were contained in the lives of the masters, their daily actions, their friendship, their sympathy with those around them. There is the saying, you can study for 1 year, but that's only worth 1 hour of real meditation. You can meditate for 1 year, and that is only worth 1 hour in the company of a perfect master. 7. All written words are dead and depend on the reader to bring them to life. All written words are, therefore, for the reader false and can only become true if the reader can make them so. And you'll hardly be able to do that since you are seeking the truth, and therefore, on your own admission, you're still in the realm of ignorance. The spiritual path is a progressive unlearning until all impressions have been eradicated from the mind. Impressions are never reality. It is only our impressions of life, strictly the impressions from life which become impressed on our mind stuff, which prevent our realising existence. And you can see how Francis has assimilated from Baba the notion of sanskaras, but how he's always able to put it in his own fresh and non-technical way. Without this unlearning, the ground cannot be in a fit condition for sowing the new crop. The parable of the sower is the illustration of this. So those 7 points cover the first part, called the path. Second part is called the foundation. The eradication of all impressions, or rather the balancing of the impressions of good and bad, which automatically wipes out both, is the work of a master. It's impossible for one to do it for oneself, because just as one's body could not kill its own body without the agency of mind, so mind cannot cancel itself without the agency of self, with a capital S. And one does not know the self. Therefore, it requires one who is established in self, the master, to do the cancelling. However, this is the XYZ or XYZ of the matter. And in this essay, it's only about the ABC of the affair. So away we go with some unlearning we have to do. 1, these are the things you have to get rid of. That material ambition, even if realised, can be productive of lasting happiness. Okay. Sensible. That you can get something out of nothing. You cannot get knowledge from pools of ignorance, discussion groups. You can, of course, get information which you did not possess. You cannot get real art or fine craft or satisfying human relationships without love. 3, that you can get something for nothing. First, that was to get something out of nothing. This is that you can get something for nothing. You get exactly what you give. More specifically, in 4, he says that you could acquire a lot of articles for your home or person without doing a lot of work for them. Francis saw from his own, if you like, left-wing perspective, he saw a real weakness in being any sort of parasite in the world, because you built up a karmic debt to the goods and services that you were consuming without taking any responsibilities and repaying that sort of debt. So he says quite a bit. As he says, using other people's energy makes a real big fella debt, unless you can find some means of repaying. 5, that the qualities of humanity are natural and don't have to be practiced. Evolution itself was a practice by which we became human beings. Only by the practice of humanity will we escape from the narrowness of ourselves and inherit or make manifest our inherent divinity. Become bridges to the beyond man. Become, as Jesus told us to become, perfect as your Father is perfect. Francis, of course, felt that a lot of people in the West had lost all sense of spirituality by ignoring their spiritual heritage from Christianity and treating it with scorn. 6, that spirituality has anything to do with vibrant health or magnetic personality. He says all animals and film stars are full of vibrant health, whereas perfect masters often have lousy health and go through all sorts of stuff. Don't get caught in that whole health business trap. 7, that acquisition of esoteric knowledge has anything to do with the spiritual path. There are societies innumerable which hand out this sort of knowledge, most of it nonsense. And whatever of it is true is not the path, because they lack that one, a master, to initiate one onto the path. So 7 easy to make mistakes, mistaken views which have to be discarded. Now on to section 3 of the 4 sections, the method. With that saying of Francis's that you've probably read before, it's better to read than gossip. It's better to meditate than read. It is better to love than meditate. But you are at the stage of reading. So, if you're going to have to read books, Francis gives quite a bit of advice on what you should read. The only ones that will reveal anything of truth to you are those written by men of truth, or recorded by their disciples, or by means of truth-seeing saints. Therefore, avoid any and all books about the subject, and confine yourself strictly to those of the above 2 claimants, and that's perfect masters and saints. And Mayababa, the present spiritual authority in the world, is the only perfect master to have given the one eternal teaching in the English language. Only the perfect masters have the real knowledge. Remember that the more mere information you collect, the more junk you have to clear out of your mind before the seeds of real knowledge can be sown. And you start to get the feeling as you read the book that this is not just a primer of good common sense advice from an intelligent person, but it's also an act of great homage to his master. And it's from this point on that it starts to impress itself on the reader. And it's a very moving thing to have. The following list of books may help you from my own experience of reading, but someone else could have given you another list of books just as good. And he rattles off a whole lot of books like a Bhagavad Gita and so on, which these days I think we're a lot more familiar with than people would have been back in the 50s.
Geoff, were there any surprises on that list for you?
There are a few I hadn't heard of, but and they include the Gathas of Zarathustra. But by and large, they're things like Hafiz, the Mathnawi, In an Eastern Rose Garden, and of course Baba's Discourses and so on. So, no, there's not. They're pretty much the spiritual classics. After a reasonable survey of what the spiritual path entails and a proper investigation of what the teaching means, the next thing is to try and to be honest with yourself as to whether you really wish to take this path or not. I say try because honesty is perhaps the most difficult of all the virtues to accomplish. Yet without honesty, self-confidence and direction are impossible. One will go a certain distance and then one will wonder, should I be doing this? Is there not something else I'd rather try? To be a hypocrite, to think one ought to take this path because it's the right thing to do, to pretend interest to yourself or to others, is, as Baba pointed out, the worst thing of all. There can be no blame attached to not wanting to take this path. It simply means that one is not ready for it yet. The great teachers have never said that one should take this path. Rather, they've said, there is a path to take when you're ready for it. To be a hypocrite is to miss out on the delights of the world and the bliss of spiritual attainment. Honesty in motive must be clearly established and requires constant watchfulness. As the Chinese emperor had the words, "As the sun make it new, day by day make it new, yet again make it new," written in letters of gold on his bathtub. So you would be well advised to write on the wall of your shower recess, or next to your mirror, "As the sun makes it clean, day by day make it clean, yet again make it clean." So 3 main methods to do that: increased control of one's bodies by selfless service and by devotion. He goes on, though, to emphasise the way of love, which, as we've all come across, of course, with Baba and with Baba's disciples, that it's the way of love is really the only way to open to us and to be taken in this age. And for that, the only completely satisfactory manner of practicing this method is to serve a perfect master, to surrender all one's actions to him and obey his directions implicitly. Actions done under his order are neither good nor bad, since good and bad do not apply to him. And he accepts the responsibility of the actions. In the method of devotion, love for the Master is the safest and best object of love. And then a pretty key statement, I think. Love for the Master becomes easy as soon as one sees that he's not another, but is nothing else than the living representation of one's own self. To love him is to ultimately fall in love with one's self, capital S, and in self-love, the whole purpose of creation is fulfilled. Opening out into the village, into the vision, splendid as he gets towards the end. Our activity in this world is only so much scurrying of ants. And though ants are an excellent example of energy, they're hardly a model of direction and accomplishment. All our love for this and that object of possession is only so much intoxication. And if one cannot become sober, it's better to be drunk for God than mad after things which by their very nature have no permanency or living value. And then he goes on to quote, of all people, Dr. Ghani. Abdul Ghani Musif. Association with a perfect master is the hardest of all austerities. Well, I'm sure Ghani felt that often. Nowadays, discipleship is thought of as being undemocratic. We all wish not to bow our heads. And he goes on to just say how necessary it is to overcome that sort of blockage that we've got in the Western world. And that discipleship is a positive attitude for one who recognises his condition of unfulfilment and for one who can bear the processes and conditions imposed by the circumstances of fulfilment. Discipleship begins in respect and service and culminates in love and contains within it all blessings and attainments. I'm starting to get towards time, so it's a pity because there are a couple of nice poems that Francis actually wrote here that you don't find anywhere else that are really nice to read. But I think I might switch from here on, having talked about what discipleship is and the need then for a perfect master. He goes on to say in our time we have Baba, and Baba is available to all at the moment. And then he goes on to make his own personal testimony, having talked about what an avatar is, which I don't think we need to go on into here, because most of us have a pretty fair idea, especially after this afternoon, of what an avatar is. But we don't need to have the concept expressed. But at the end there, he switches from talking about avatars to talking about Baba himself. Meher Baba. Who is this person called Meher Baba? Who is the spiritual authority of this time? What does he look like? What does he do? He's a man the same as you and I. He hasn't a transcendental Christ-like look, so fondly conjured up in escapist mentalities, the possessors of which prefer any sort of imagination which will approve of their innate indolence rather than a reality which would cause them to face themselves and force them perhaps into a momentous decision, who in fact live in a dream and foster those imaginations which will sustain the dream, and who, if they've heard of them, refer to Christ Krishna as a pagan and to Christ Buddha as an idol. You would pass him in the street, unless by chance you noticed his eyes, in which case you might be disturbed and conceive an extraordinary wish to follow him to the ends of the earth. Not that his glance is piercing, but rather that his eyes reflect you to yourself, which is disturbing enough, and at the same time awaken something deeper in one, which one has before glimpsed at half moments, and hint at the possibility of it being fulfilled. If he stopped and you spoke to him, his answer would not be in some lofty, impeccable manner, but friendly to the point. If you allowed your whim to follow him, and you did, you would find that you never knew him, but that he always knew you. Again, this knowing would not be demonstrated by reading your mind, although you would in time become aware that your mind was an open book to him, but simply as a dear friend knows one because he is part of one, as simply as Jesus knew that the woman by the well had had 4 or 5 husbands. You would find that he eats very little. He fasted for a whole year on a cup of coffee each day. That he never seems to sleep. That at times his body manifests symptoms of illness. But that illness has never laid him up, except once when he got involved in a motor car accident, when he was the last of the party to heal and walk again. He's never performed a miracle even for himself. He always appears to be working. You have this feeling even when he's playing games with you. You would observe, if you kept awake all night and took up a position outside his room, that one of his men is on duty to him all night and would be going in and out of the door. You would probably feel that he works as no one you've known before or read about works. But you will not have the faintest idea what at, even when he's carrying out a program of physical work, such as when he founded a boys' school and washed their clothes and cleaned out the latrines himself, or when he sits, say from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m, except for half an hour lunch break, handing out cartloads of bananas to people as they file by. You will have the impression that it is not the physical work which is the work. In short, you will be faced with an apparently ordinary-looking man who is most extraordinary. And then one day, as you're looking at him, the incredible thought may occur to you, as it did to me: this man is everything and nothing. He is nowhere and everywhere. All the universes are but a speck in his consciousness. And if at that moment he smiles at you, as he did to me, all universes are but a speck in his consciousness, but at this moment he's bent his loving regard on me. I, who am not a speck in the universes. And in this loving glance, you will feel no shame, no sin, no hopelessness, But the thought, extraordinary and ridiculous as it may seem, will occur to you that you too one day will also arrive at where he is. And possibly you'll laugh at the sheer daring and certainty of this thought, and his eyes will laugh too, confirming your own. And he may ask you to what extent you're willing to do his will and his work. And you may answer that you are willing to do whatever he asks of you. And he may push the point further and say, at the cost of your life? And you will answer as simply as a child, yes, Father. Because you will know that unless in his loving will, your life is worthless anyway. And that one day you will die anyway. And if it can be for him, then death will have that sweetness which you have envisioned of life's ecstasy. The boundary of death will have in fact disappeared. And in its place will be the vista of life or lives in, by and through with God. At that moment of your surrender, a surrender sweeter than even the embrace of a loved one, the narrow concept of yourself, which you form by identifying yourself with all those things which are not you, will vanish. There will be nothing to accomplish, no ambition worth fulfilling, but the accomplishment of your own reality. There is no path to take, no learning to learn, no practice to practice, nothing to do but finally surrender your ignorance to his knowledge, your misery to his bliss, your life to his existence, because he is you and you he. For all things are in Christ Jesus, and in the most pure and holy Zarathustra, and in the divine and sportive Krishna. But in Christ Baba is the authority and the word living, and the grace, mercies, and benefits of this age. Yeah, hopefully, one day, relatively soon, the complete book will be available from a barber bookshop near you. It will also appear on that wonderful website of Steve Hine, which I hope some of you have come across, francisbrabazon.org, where you'll find it along with many other priceless treasures. Jai Baba.